Welcome to Tales from the Golden Imp. I am Joe Craig, the Impish Skald. Last time we visited with Morris as he passed on to Necropolis' embrace and found his final resting place. He had a great surprise as he was joined with Adia the Green. There was also a meeting with Ethan Eldos and Olan Durf, as the two cities tried to put bad blood behind them to handle the larger threat at hand. Jaina was also greeted by Meg to check on her to make sure she was alright. While this was happening, Regos was contemplating the meaning of the oracle sending him to the frozen mountains of Malatin and Chunda. What's next for our heroes? We shall find out in this episode of the Calmbringer Cycle. Welcome to Tales from the Golden Imp. Episode 7, Crossroads. As the fire was beginning to die out in the common room, Jaina, Regos, and Meg were finishing off that small barrel of ale that they were sharing. So, where do we go from here? I don't think it would be much help to go back to Malatin. We could get information from the council there, but beyond that, I'm not exactly sure that's where we're meant to go. Regos was speaking through a pipe between his teeth, surveying the last of his ale in his mug. Jaina finished off the last of her ale while contemplating the question. I need word from Justicar Moorish for his orders. If he wishes me to act independently, then I can go where the wind guides us. There is far more at stake here than the cities of Malatin and Chunda. We're talking about the return of Callisto. He nearly took over all of Calidria last time he was around. What if the Skald was bluffing? Durg is in trouble if they aren't warned either way. So is Durg our next play? Meg mentioned. Regos took another puff from the pipe. Well, I figured it'll take about half a day to get the message to the Moorish character and his response, and we'll need supplies regardless of what we do. All I know is this is big enough to cost me gravely, let alone the people of Malatin and Chunda. I think you're right. Durg is the next target, but not an easy one. The Skald is going to need more than a couple of thousand goblins to hit a city like that if she's going to take it down. If we saw all of her numbers, she must have other plans for the city of Durg. Meg pointed her mug at Regos. You've got a thought there. She either has to increase her numbers or she has a particular target to hit in Durg. What could she take down with a few thousand goblins and a dozen or so trolls? Both Regos and Meg looked over to Jaina. Jaina, realizing that she was the center of attention all of a sudden, she took a deep breath, thinking about the layout of the city and all the tunnels that came in and out of the city. She thought of all the potential targets that would be the biggest hit to the city, and all things pointed to the hardest thing in Durg to take down. The Forge. The whole city was built around the Forge in some capacity. It was the heart of Durg. It was the lifeblood of Durg. After a deep breath, she exhaled and spoke. The Forge would make the most and least amount of sense for her to try to target. Most sense in that is the heart of the city, heart of the power of Durg. Without the Forge, many of the weapons of the kingdom of Aeternitas depend on would be gone. Least in that is the most fortified location in the city, let alone the number of war priests that call that place sanctuary. It's a holy site for all that follow Belden. They consider it his greatest wonder. It really is the only place that makes sense, if it's not the Academy of Belden. But that's just a learning institute. Yeah, the Academy is a thought. It would cut the line of priests, but that would be a long-term thing. Many of these things could be rebuilt. The Forge makes more sense to me. What about you, Meg? What your life travels tell you? Meg considered. Well, my question is, what if she's not working alone? What if her target is something else? something indirect. If I were her, I wouldn't move on Durg without a force strong enough to take the city down, or ensure that that nut that is the forge could be cracked. She has mental powers. That's how she controls the beasts. And the amount of amethyst in the cave system could work as a beacon to amplify her abilities. What if she spent some of that time reaching out to something else? I'll sit in silence for a bit, thinking over the options. Well, Meg, darling, now you have quite the skill to paint the brightest of pictures. Reinforcements, but from where? Devolton? They would have to come by sea, and I'm sure that there's a port that's dedicated to the city of Durg, isn't there? Of course there is. Durg has a small settlement that serves as the port of Durg. That settlement is in Belden Bay, just north of Durg, along the Ice Flow Canal. Port Skara. That ice flow is about to break loose for the vessels to start traveling again. So it would be possible. Aid would have to come by sea to not be noticed. Zaphos is still on high alert for anything by sky. And there is Muzzuria to consider as well. But how quickly they bent the knee to the great Lord Callisto during the start of their war. Meg and Regos were both half-elves and had no love for Muzzuria. With their past, Meg and Regos were both half-elves and had no love for Muzzuria with their past of blood purity and the like. Let alone this whole view that elves and dragons were the only pure races. They were indeed a problem in the past. Sentiments were changing there, but until the royal family changed hands, it was doubtful that it would go away completely. Both had been there in their travels, and on the ground things were changing. The outright racism there was getting better, but slow to change with the longest of years, or so it was said. Sure, they have changed their policy on slavery, but they still had indentured servitude. Until that changed, they would be the black spot of all the kingdoms of Calidria. And that wouldn't change until Eros Halafasti was no longer in power. Eros had been in power in the center of the line of this racial purity hogwash that Halafasti family had been spewing for thousands of years. They have also kept the Butcher in business over that time. Even with his expulsion from the Death Speakers, he maintained his position as the Kingdom of Feduria's executioner for that duration. Neither of them had any love for the Kingdom of Feduria. Meg had very little love for anyone that would call her a half-breed. Luckily, the world of Calidria was set against Feduria in this. It would only be a matter of Feduria stepping out of line to have the whole world set against them in an active war. For all the talk of the calm, things were ripe and kindled for another conflict. The calm was only around because the conflict hadn't started yet. Aliston was moving to take territory in Slykin. Edius seemed to be behaving itself as normal. Feduria was moving politically to take a foothold in the Kingdom of Kindor. That left Devolton and Credo. Devolton was still in shambles, but it was rebuilding. And well, Credo? Who knew? As dawn approached, Gillard Tones finished composing his report for Lord Varfarrion. Durg was in trouble from all signs, but how much trouble was still unknown. How could their vigilance have proved so unfruitful? That was a concern for another day, however. The Skald was back, and with that brought the others. Tones was a true delight for the council that gathered in Edius, for he held information that others did not have. All the talk of Linsid and Skald by the people of Malatin, they were forgetting two important things. There were 4 sentinels, and one of them was still confirmed to be active during the calm. Yes, Harrow's fate was unknown, but Geralt, he was active and had been for the duration of the calm. There had been sightings of Geralt over the years. He was a military technician and the sentinel that Tones respected the most. Tones thought of himself as a military tactician as well and studied the movements of Callisto's armies in earnest. Though, through all that, he had gained a respect for Geralt. Much of the night was spent on discussing what was potential targets. All agreed that the Forge would be the main target in Durg. What had kept Tones awake this night? How would they hit such an embedded target? Specifically, how would he hit such a fortified location? Looking over the map of Durg that he had nearly memorized now, the Forge was at the lowest level of the city itself. Only the mines were lower than that. It was a sacred space, so access was not prohibited, as many residents would go to chapel there throughout the week. The number of goblins present, even if the estimates were half of reality, were just too low to be successful. Tones considered the population of beasts in the region as well. There had to be something they were missing. His eyes kept going over the map, not wanting to conclude his report just yet. There had to be something he was missing. Callisto typically hit with 2 different tactics. First was an overwhelming force. He wanted his opponents to lose all hope before the first body hit the ground. The second, and the one that made sense here, was a pincer attack. We knew the vector for the first claw, but where was the second coming from? He had been awake for far too long at this point. Nothing else would make sense. For all of his long years, sleep was still needed. Perhaps the solution would come to him in his dreams. He finished his report and packed away the letter to have it sent off. He finished with, "I'm missing something. We'll report more when I have the missing pieces to the puzzle. For now, Durg will need aid, and need aid immediately." With that, Tones settled to his bed, gave a prayer to Halafaust to see the unseen portion of the enemy's plan. He prayed for continued strength and prayed for the war that was to come. He prayed that as few lives be lost in this war as absolutely necessary. War was war, however, and rarely was it a bloodless affair. With that, Tones climbed into bed and attempted to get some rest as the first crows of the town's roosters began to sound. Dandros awoke with a fitful swing of his fist at an enemy that was no longer there. He wasn't used to the dark places being dangerous. They were his home. This whole ordeal had violated his home, and he wasn't taking it well. He moved to the wash basin to splash a little water on his face. He had to center himself. It was just a dream. Dandros got himself a drink of wine to wash away the memory of the dream from the forefront of his mind. It was nights like these that he wished he could look in on his daughter to make sure she was safe. He even wished that he could do that for his wife, but that ship had sailed. One fact of the dream hung with him, though. It was in Durg. The carved halls of Durg he would recognize no matter how long he was away from those great halls. He could even picture the tunnel in question. It was one of the places he would slip off to when he was in his studies there about stonework. The fact that he was a miner after all of his training was almost blasphemy. His hands were made to create beautiful things with stone, not take precious things from it. Another swallow of wine, his breath was now steady. Dandros walked over to the bedroom that he kept clean and ordered for Deidre. in case his daughter ever wanted to come home. No, not home, but to visit him. If there was danger in Durg, he would have to be there. He could not let harm come to his family. They were still his family, even if marriage was no more. He still loved Sylvia, but they couldn't live together. It was just bad for everyone involved. Sylvia was right about one thing. He was wasting his talents in the mines. But he had to put food on the table somehow. Selling trinkets to other miners just wasn't something that paid the bills. He did all right around Calming Day and when the traders came to town, but those were few and far between. Dandros pondered over the dream again. He looked up to the stone hammer that he kept above the altar. It was the only weapon he ever made. As soon as his eyes set upon the altar, words hit the back of his mind. You are free to change your craft. You aren't tied to just one. You work stone. That can mean a lot of different things. Your family, your friends need you. I need you. The voice was his own, but the words were not. But the meaning could not be clearer. He was heading to Durg, it seems. Perhaps the elves were headed that way. He would find out in a few hours. Perhaps he could get a ride with them. Jaina dismounted from her borrowed horse and tied it off to the trailhead. She chided herself about what she was doing. Yes, there was a small contingency that hung back to make sure the cave stayed vacant, but if the goblins came back in force, that small number would mean nothing to them. Jaina's day had started early with sending her report and asking the questions that she had agreed with Meg and Regos about. There were too many factors at play. She needed advice on what she should do. That, and she didn't want to continue on without the blessing of the temple. Even though, if it came to it, she was continuing on. With or without the blessing of the temple. She knew she had the blessing of Hallis, and that's what mattered. As she approached the cave, she offered some warmish stew to the two guards at the entrance using the old outpost that the goblins had used. Jaina exchanged pleasantries with the guards, but continued on her way, taking a torch with her as she went. She was on a mission, and had little time to see to it without alerting anyone else as to what that mission was. She turned right at the T-intersection of the cave, and then took the next left. She followed the path of gore from the initial site to the final resting place of Morris. The frozen look of determination that was on Morris's face, and the danger of the whole situation. How could Jaina have not checked then and there? The goblin bones were his prized possession. He was spawned from a black dragon, and with it came the addiction that they carried. For Morris, it was odd-shaped bones. They were his little hoard, his little treasures. Waving the torch here and there, around where he lay, Jaina found nothing. She was on edge, but she had to know. She had to see if they were there. As she looked, a shadow moved across the floor. In one practiced motion, she dropped her torch, took her glaive in both hands, and moved to a defensive stance. Then relaxed. Regos, what in the name of the gods are you doing here? He isn't the only one here, Meg announced as she moved forward from the shadows as well. What are we looking for? Yeah, it's a little hard to find something when you don't know what that something is, Regos said with a smile as he moved up to next to where Jaina had been looking. So it is we that is looking for something then, not just me, Here I thought I was slipping off on my lonesome instead of wasting time that you all clearly needed before we left. Jaina nearly huffed these words as she spoke. Well, if you must know, I'm looking for something that belonged to Morris. He had a small pouch around his neck. It wasn't on him when we entombed him. Regos then started looking in earnest. Meg moved over to join them, while Jaina put the glaive back in a resting position. Their eyes were better, and just having more eyes to look would put some certainty on the situation. Say, Regos, you don't have any spells at your disposal to replay a scene of a crime, do you? Regos laughed slightly. I've read about spells like that, but it was way beyond my skill in casting. I hear tale from the big cities and why judicial forces employ masters when they can a magus to be a chief investigator. But I don't believe them, honestly. City judicial forces couldn't afford a mage of that degree. Maybe a city capital or trade hub or something like that. They just aren't enough mages of that power around. And most of the ones that are around are stuck in a book somewhere doing research for the next big thing to solve the problem, solve all the world's problems, or make all new ones. Me? No. Nothing of that sort. Meg and Jaina both looked to Regos with a shocked expression. I didn't think there were such magics, Jaina finally said. Magic truly is a powerful art. I understand why there are those that wish to regulate its teachings more closely. And you can't regulate something you don't understand. Well, you can, you just can't do it well. That's the purpose of the Council of Magi in Zaphos. Well, them in the constabulary, Regos continued as he was searching the grounds. What's a constabulatory? Meg asked while searching the other side of the cavern. It's what we call them, the constabulary for magical justice. They're the boogeymen of the magical world. They're the ones that come after, well, people like me. People that learn and practice magic outside the confines of the system that's in place. People that would rather not ask for permission to seek knowledge and just seek it. Those that misuse magic, whatever that looks like. But they sanctioned Harrow and his studies. It's a broken system that just hasn't fallen apart yet. That ivory tower is cracked. It's just not crumbling yet. Meg, knowing she was touching on a subject close to a wound, walked carefully to the question. Is that why they expelled you? For not playing by the rules? Regos laughed again, this time a little pained. Nah, that's not the reason. That's the reason they would come after me today. I was expelled because I stole a book from a professor. It was in a language he couldn't read, but he wouldn't allow anyone access to the book, so I stole it. I read it and gave it to a bookseller in the little corner of the city that dealt with that type of literature. The man tried to pass it off as some great journal of the magus of old, but it was really just bad poetry. Sure, it was written by a magus of old, but it wasn't anything about magical theory or anything of the sort. It was bad poetry written by a brilliant mind who was hopelessly in love with an heir to a throne 2 kingdoms away. When I embarrassed him about the contents of the book, he expelled me. Of course, he used the theft as the reason for expulsion. Telling the story felt good, but now was the judgment that he was concerned with. How would these new friends take the tale? The truth was going to come out sooner or later. It may as well be sooner, so Regos knew where they stood. If they were to trust him, and he them, he would have to get the cards out on the table. And before he could ask Meg about her past, he gave up his. Meg considered in silence ramifications of the truth that Regos just revealed. He was an expelled student of magic. He was still practicing. That would be something that they would have to keep to themselves. She knew how she would handle this in her past. There was little judgment that she could cast upon Regos. But Jaina was an agent of lawfulness. How would she take this news? She had to know before she could reveal her past. As for Jaina, she understood Regos more than they thought she did. Jaina considered his story for a long minute in silence, while she continued to look for Morris's bag of goblin bones. So you did steal a book, and that's what got you expelled. Why do you continue to practice magic when you're supposed to be banned from such actions? Because I'll be damned to allow some archaic society to tell me what is right and what is wrong. Besides the fact that they expelled me because I embarrassed him, not because I stole from him. There are other punishments for that. Regos had found something. He found a twisted, gnarled bone of a goblin finger. This isn't what we're looking for, is it? He raised the bone up to the light. Jaina looked at the bone. It was one of the 2 bones that she gave to him on Calming Day. Jaina, in her rage, grew to the point that her glaive began to glow. Yes, that is something that we're looking for. That's one of the bones I gave Morris on Calming Day, as a Calming Day gift. She took the bone from Regos, held it for a moment before putting it into her coin purse. She then took a closer look at the ground where the bone was found. The ground had some disturbed dirt that marked the ground as what looked to be finger streaks. This looked as if something had laid there in the center of the disturbance, but was taken, leaving this one lonely bone behind. This proved her worst thought. His pouch of bones had been taken. Well, we won't find the rest here. That wench took them from Morris. She took his bones. We must find this skald. I have to find these bones. Well, where do we start? Asked Meg. Durg, of course. That's just where the skald's heading, Regos responded for Jaina. Sir, we have reports from Sir Gillard Tones from the aid that we have provided. Muzzuria rushed in to the side of Vyden Varfarrion. Vyden was enjoying a cup of tea watching the city move in the early morning fog and the mist from the falls. The great falls that this forest was named after. The rush of water could be felt at this distance from the falls, and Muzzuria had believed that she was not hurted for the briefest of moments prior to Vyden's nod. Vyden turned to take the report. Thank you, Muzzuria. Could you fetch me Alana? Muzzuria left with a bow of acknowledgement, and Vyden started reading the report. Tones was an orderly person and recorded everything in the order in which it transpired. Vyden had already prepared for the road. Karos was the next stop in the wake of the news, and he knew this before he completed the first page. All in all, things had been successful, which was a good thing. But the news that carried with it were dire words. Just as he finished the report, Alana arrived, still dressed in a flowing green dress. She had been to Mass. Thinking of the time he had hoped he had not disturbed her prayers. The palace was also a temple to the god Halafaust. They ruled from the Hall of Justice and were being called to uphold justice once more. Did I disrupt you, Alana? Vyden had to ask, knowing this would not see it as a disruption either way. But he had to ask the question. No, Father, we had concluded. I was eating and socializing when Muzzuria found me. You have news from the north? Alana said while moving up to her father's side. Vyden was caught by the thought of just how much like her mother she looked. How long before he was counseling suitors on how best not to foul things up like he had. He didn't have time for such revelry, but long ago he learned that you needed to appreciate the moments. This was one of those moments in his long life that he knew he wouldn't have many more of. Yes. We have the reports back from Tones. The rescue mission was a success. We managed to save most of the people that went abducted. There were casualties, of course. But the towns of Chunda and Malatin will survive. The grain reserves will be tested this winter, and they may be too proud to ask for aid in that department. However, that is where the good news ends. They are back, aren't they? The Sentinels? Alana cut straight to the point. She had been having dreams that disturbed her. Dreams that she hadn't had since childhood during the dark days. The boogeymen of the world were back and she knew it. Vyden smiled at her for the briefest of moments, appreciating how well she paid attention. Yes, I don't believe all of them are yet, but they are back. The Skald has a new body, but the reports about her actions and movements are too close to not be her. I'll be leaving for Karos in a few days, but in the interim, we need to make plans for how we will react to this threat. You will oversee things while I'm away. It's time you start getting some leadership under your belt. Vyden briefed her on the key points of Tone's report, and they spent the morning cross-referencing it with the information that they had from the early days of the war with Callisto. One thing was fact. Aeternitas was a thorn in the side of Callisto. If they had to do it all over again, they would try to hit first. Aeternitas had the advantage of being as far away from Devolton as possible. Either way you went, you had multiple kingdoms that separated Devolton. To the east, you had Aliston, Feduria, and Kindle, at least. And to the west, well, you had Zaphos, but much more sea. Zaphos was not a friend of Devolton. But then again, the leader of that kingdom tried his best to stay out of wars. You couldn't stand neutral when the world was at peril. By choosing not to do anything, you are allowing evil of the world to win. Vyden had said those exact words to the Lord of Zaphos, this Vero Cass. This was weeks before Cass was forced to bend the knee to Devolton. That was over 500 years ago, yet this human remained in power over Zaphos. By this time, those that understood the way of the world knew that Cass wasn't a mere human. But what he was, anyone could guess. He chose the guise of a human. Alas, Vyden was drifting, as it seemed to do more and more these days. If Callisto was determined to make sure Aeternitas fell first, they were to make it a hard task to say the least. Aeternitas City lay in ruins still. Karos acted as the capital of Aeternitas, and so it would be to Karos to meet the minds of the kingdom. Concluding the report, the thoughts of both Vyden and Alana went to what they could do for Durg. They could not allow Durg to fall. The machine of war that they would require to fight off the forces of Callisto would be needed, and the heart of that machine was Durg. Debating the finer points of what the enemy's plans could be, the sun rose in the sky. Discussing Tone's thoughts over the forms of attack that were most common by Callisto brought them to the map room. Tones was right, they were missing something. Durg was an underground city with great fortifications. These fortifications would have to be breached before an assault on the city could take place. But how would that assault come? The numbers of the reported goblins would be enough to cause some chaos. But to actually breach the fortifications of the city? It would be doubtful. That is, unless they had deteriorated that much over the past 300 years. Durg was far and away one of the most fortified cities in all of Calidria. Some 300 years ago, but that was a long time ago, and things can change in that time. Even with that, the physical fortifications that would exist should still be more than enough to hold up from such an assault. Alana had a thought, however. What if this force is just one portion of the assault? What if this is an infiltration force to open a way for something far more aggressive? Vyden had considered that as well, but didn't like the thought. He would have to send word to Zaphos to see if they were seeing any major Devolton ship activity to report. It would have to come by sea if it were Devolton military proper. They certainly would have rebuilt to some extent over the past 300 years. I'll have to get some information from the spy masters to see what we have there. Come to think of it, we haven't heard from Kirstark from a few months. But he does go to ground on the regular. Alana suddenly looking concerned, but composed. Saw a key spy master involved and hasn't reported in a few months, and suddenly the threat of military action is on our lands? I know they were paranoid, but what if there were credence to their concerns? I'll review the last reports that Kirstark sent, as well as the ones from people in Zaphos, to see if I can puzzle together something. Father, we have missed something. What good is a network of spies if we fail to put together the puzzles? Excellent. You do that and I will get in contact with several others to see what information we can glean before I must leave for Kairos. It's a 3-day ride, so I should have another day or two before I have to go. You will have the authority of the city while I'm away. I know not how long that will be. It's beyond time that I trust you with the full authority of the oaken seat. Vyden delivered his message with the presence of authority, more than a parental stature. He was speaking to her now as Lord of the Forest, not as her father. This sudden shift caught Alana a little off guard, but she corrected it swiftly. She corrected her posture, gave a bow of acknowledgement. Of course, Lord Varfarrion, I will do my duty. Back in Chunda, Jaina had received a response from Karish that she was awaiting for. Regos and Meg were gathering supplies for the road while she got caught up on the missive. She couldn't help herself but allow that iron face to smile as she read the words that Karish had for her. It had been a long time in coming, but it was time for her to be sent out into the world to do her duties. Karish had complimented her on her work with the rescue mission and for taking that initiative. Furthermore, he supported her wishes to travel with Regos and Meg to see how much deeper this rabbit hole went. His parting words to her were, "We all have to answer the call of Hallis. She has given you this charge. You must follow it. Go with the light, and may Hallis guide you always." Jaina folded up the letter and slid it into her armor. She then went over to the bar and ordered a tankard of ale. So you can smile, eh?" Looking down, Jaina realized that she was being talked to by a dwarven woman. This dwarven woman was stroking the scruff on her chin. Jaina then blushed with embarrassment, not realizing that she was still smiling. And the blush only made her smile that much more. The two women shared a laugh and then a drink. Jaina couldn't help but buy the lady a drink after making her laugh like that. Well, a couple hours later, the door opens for Meg and Regos. Their arms are loaded with gear for the road, and Jaina is laughing hard with this dwarven woman. The woman is telling a story that had Jaina laughing hard. Regos leaned over to Meg. "I didn't know she could laugh." Meg agreed and added, "Yeah, especially in the state we found her earlier today. She was a wreck earlier. I guess this is what she needed." Regos and Meg tucked away the supplies, letting the two women have their laugh. By the time they returned downstairs, the story was finishing. The story was finished in time to hear Jaina ask the woman her name. "Esmerelda Durf. I'm old Olin's wife. I thank you and your friends for rescuing our people. If it weren't for you lot, we wouldn't have much of a city left to rule over, so thank you. I suspect from the looks of your provisions that you'll be off before Olin returns. If there's anything we can do to help you and make your travels a success, just ask." Regos and Meg had made their way to join Jaina in hearing the revelation. Regos gave a flourish and a bow before speaking. Madame, I thank you and your husband formally for the hospitality. It has helped the coin purse, but she's getting a little light. I think we'll manage just fine, but I do have something to ask. My ask is if you have any arcane tomes that I could peruse. Arcane? Not sure. But we sure do have some older books in the house, mostly journals from prior rulers of Chunda. That you're welcome to. Hell, anyone is for that matter. Some of them may have some stuff for you. I heard you were a spellcaster. Don't you worry, your secret's safe with us, she added when Regos looked a little concerned. I never saw you cast a thing, she added with a wink. Oh, thank you greatly. It's most appreciated. Regos responded with another bow of his head. As far as the coin purse, hopefully this will help with that. As Esmerelda hefted the coin purse up to the table that she and Jaina were sitting at. Just a little something we collected for you all from the community, and a little something from Olin and me. This isn't from the city treasury, we're saving that for winter. But it should help you on your journeys. Well, Jaina, it's been fun to sit and chat with you, but I should get back. Formal duties and all that nonsense. From the city of Chunda, we thank you all. Make sure that message gets back to that dwarven chap that was with you as well. May you walk in the light of Hallis always, and listen always to the whispered words. They're typically the loudest heard. With that said, Regos escorted Esmerelda back to her home and spent the rest of the day looking through books. There was much that interested him in these tomes, but nothing to push his arcane understanding to a higher degree. By the time Regos had finished, he had mere hours before the planned departure time. Overland, they would never catch the horde. They were closer to White Harbor than to Durg, so to White Harbor and then to book passage to Port Skara, the small city outside the northern doors of Durg. This would be their path and road. What dangers will await these heroes on the road to Durg? And would they make it in time to alert Durg to the dangers that approach? We will find out next time. Thank you, travelers. Lore Corner. Keepers of the Beasts. Callisto was known for the use of beasts of Calidria as part of his military, and that was only possible with the aid of the Keepers of the Beast. These elite military units commanded the beasts that were used in battle. They were led by the powerful Skald, who it was said could control many beasts all at the same time. The nature of psychic power is said to be a gift from Waldron, but was intended to be used as a way for enlightened species to communicate with these beasts, not control them. Some speculate that this is the reason that those with the gift to control beasts lose their hair. Another interesting fact is the fact that they all share the same eye color. A purple, the same color as amethyst. Creatures controlled by the gift have glowing eyes of the same color, almost as if the eyes were smoking this purple glow. These odd factors are ones that mark a keeper to the point that it is nearly pointless to attempt to hide themselves. It is said that even magic is ineffective in disguising a keeper. It is true that even Harrow and his cabal of wizards were unable to hide the identity of the Keepers of the Beasts that made up Callisto's military forces. In the beginning of his rule, Callisto found the Skald early in the days of his reign. It is said that when she was discovered in Slykin, where there were fighting pits, where she was a legend by commanding a beast that was sent to kill her. Instead of killing it, she controlled it. From there, she was paired with the beasts to fight in the arena against other beasts, which proved ineffective, and other gladiatorial fighters. The Skald found that there were others like her, so she gathered them under the banner of Callisto. Now, not all psychic powers come with a curse that the Keepers seem to possess. Others are marked with purple eyes and have psychic abilities, but still have every hair on their head, unless it was falling out naturally. Then there were Darkwood elves that seem to lack all hair, but do not have the purple eyes. For the latter, we will discuss them and potential links to Waldron and the curse another time. The Skald was also a member of the Darkwood Elves, so it was hard to say the reason she lacked hair. But it is important to note that her new body was not a Darkwood Elf, and had hair up until she took control of that body. So who is to say what the full reason of the curse is? Perhaps that's a question for Waldrum himself. The Keepers of the Beasts, to be specific, are members of a branch in Callisto's military. Those with the ability to control beasts are called Keepers since the formation of that military force during the early Dark Days. Before then, they were known as Beastmasters, Wardens of the Wood, and many other names. It was only after the Skald formed the ranks of the Keepers of the Beast that had they been called Keepers as such. Being a military unit, they flew a black flag with a white dragon head with amethyst eyes. They did not carry weapons, but it is said that they could manipulate their bodies to have features of the beast that they controlled. Depictions of the Keepers have been made with them with long claws like protrusions, jaws like a beast, and similar features. Like any psychic ability, the use of amethyst crystals to amplify the force of will that one can muster is common. There are links between the crystals and mental abilities. The uses and abilities of various crystals and gemstones have led to full studies of the craft. Either way, the Keepers of the Beast were known to use them in various ways to amplify their abilities. It is said that that is the purpose of the large amethyst geode at the crown of the castle that Callisto ruled from. It was said to amplify a legion of keepers that he kept in the castle under his control, and in turn, that legion controlled a vast number of dragons that were always a common sight around the castle. During the Dark Days, any child born with amethyst eyes and lacking hair was a target of the Skald to bring into their fold. For some reason, Schleichen was a truly potent location for such births. Many tie it back to the fact that that's where Haldren, the Beastmaster, was from. With the Skald active once more, mothers, guard your children, for the Skald will be searching for them once more. May Haldren protect you. Well, travelers, I want to thank you once again for journeying with me. Our heroes set their sights on another road to get to the destination of Durg. But what of Dandros? Will he meet them there? Or are their roads forever diverged? Plans have been set in motion by the enemy in the shadows. Is it too late for the light to react? Or will they make their movements to catch up with the fact that the game started before they knew the pieces were in motion? All these questions and more will be answered soon, travelers. Now, if you wish to support the podcast, giving it a rating where you find it will mean a lot and really help out. Be that a thumbs up or a subscription over on YouTube. Stars and reviews where you catch your podcast would mean a lot as well. Be it Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, wherever. Or just telling a friend about the story that we're weaving. Also, if you wish to support the podcast a bit more and get the recipes of Calidria in your kitchen, then stroll over to patreon.com/goldenimpn and sign up for Patreon. There will also be additional lore content coming monthly. This will also give you access to the Discord server. Won't you join us over there and join the conversation? Now, if you wish to follow me outside the podcast space, then you can find me over on Blue Sky at Ember Skald. With that said, travelers, I want to thank you for journeying with me. And I want to thank Adrian von Ziegler for the rights to use his music in conjunction with this podcast. It means a lot, Adrian. Thank you. And with that said, I am the Emperor Skald, Joe Craig. And remember, you've been scalded.